Good afternoon, folks in Europe and in Asia Pac, and good morning, everyone who's dialing in from North America. Welcome to today's production, where we're going to be talking about the future of digital, kind of the next evolution beyond maybe phase one. So we really feel we're moving to a whole new phase of how practically do we actually get there. We'll be talking a lot about the concept of the digital OneOffice, and we'll be sharing some new research from a major study we did with the digital leadership at Cognizant. And I myself, Phil First, the CEO and Chief Analyst at HfS. I'd love to get my colleagues to introduce themselves as well, who are working with me on this production today. So Paul Roerig, can you please come forward?
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. My name is Paul Roerig, and I head up strategy for Cognizant Digital Business.
Thank you, Paul. And do we have Sandeep on the line? Sandeep Dadlani, who's the Chief Digital Officer at Mars?
Yeah. Hi, Phil. Hi, Paul. Hi, everybody. This is Sandeep. Great talking to you today. Yeah.
Great. Thanks for taking the time, Sandeep. We're excited to hear from you. And last but not least, my colleague Saurabh Gupta, who's our Chief Strategy Officer at HfS.
Hi, everyone. This is Saurabh. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer here at HfS. Looking forward to this discussion.
Thank you. Excellent. So just as an introduction then, a lot of what we're talking about today sort of really falls under this mantra we're defining as digital operations, where we're really starting to think a lot more about the coming together of software, business operations, and services, which have traditionally always been chasms apart, with different mindsets, vernaculars, conversations, ideas of what constitutes value, and often very different cultures. And I think until recently, software people often struggle to understand operations people, and vice versa. Everyone thought they were sort of top of the corporate food chain. But I think in the last couple of years, we've really seen this coming together of diverse groups of people to really think differently about how we run global operations in this digital era. And one thing is really clear. I think a lot of the outsourcing phenomenon of the past 20 years is really making way for a genuine industry in which we all play a part, an industry where we've really got no choice but to develop learning programs, sustainable business strategies, and real actionable investments that we have to make to survive. And what's most fascinating are these new conversations that have rapidly emerged to bridge the divide between technologists and the business operators. And so, we're defining our whole research at HfS, really around this phenomenon of digital operations. So now I'd like to transition to Paul, who's going to kick off talking about the research that we've really just completed and released. And he's going to talk about how to make digital your core strength. Over to you, Paul.
Yeah, thanks very much, Phil. So everyone, like Phil was saying, we've heard a lot about digital for years now. The term keeps getting thrown around all over the place, and it can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But the one thing that's entirely consistent is there's no longer any debate about businesses simply having to embrace the power of new technologies and applying those new technologies to every process, every experience, to be able to change how they're creating value. And it's no longer theory. And the study that we conducted together really proves the point that we are at the early stages of a dramatically new economy, a new economy where technologies are driving new value creation. And it's now incumbent on all of us, whether you're on the provider side or you're making decisions for your company, to embrace these new technologies in a way that's safe and effective. And what we have now is really some data to help explore what's working in the market and then what do we do tomorrow. The one thing that we found is it's absolutely time to strengthen your digital core. Senior leaders who are thinking this is just going to be fine, it's all going to blow over, this whole quote unquote digital thing is just a theory, well, they're in for a rough ride. And we did find, and I'll share the data in a moment, that companies that are not leading with digital today are actually slipping farther and farther behind. So if you're not leading with digital today, then it's really time to quit stalling and get moving. Now, the study is, like Phil said, we're really excited about this because it's one of the first deep looks into over 400 large enterprises across the world to understand the impact of digital business. How is it changing operations? And more importantly, to the OneOffice theme that you hear today, how are smart companies connecting the consumer experience to the middle and back office processes that are really the guts and the operations, the core work of any major enterprise? And so what did we learn about that? So just quickly, we'll talk about what are the characteristics of digital winners, what is a digital OneOffice and how do we get there, and then is it a journey to Mars? Well, not really. We've got a practitioner here that's going to give us all a reality check, and then we've left plenty of time for Q&A. So let's start with what sets the digital winners apart from the rest. Well, the first lesson that we learned is that digital core strength means growth. We've spent years now thinking that digital technologies are really about, okay, can you do this better, faster, cheaper? And that's still a key part of the story. I'll come to that in a second. But the digital leaders are looking at the processes and experiences of their consumers, and they're saying, how can I apply these new technologies, whether it's AI or content in context or the connected Internet of Things, connected products, or software for the digital economy, and how does that drive growth? How does that drive new revenue, and how does that drive overall market valuation? Oops. Fumbling with the technology here. So one of the big things that we learned is that most people have said, like we mentioned earlier, the debate is over. Digital is no longer core IT, it's all technology. It's not just within the purview of the CIO, it's actually now the spend, the actual concern about digital technologies is now federated across the entire organizations. Business unit owners, CEOs in boardrooms, they're all concerned about how broadening the definition of quote unquote digital, so it's no longer core IT, it's all technology that any company does to change everything. More than 2/3 recognize that it's now an imperative to align business processes to human wants and needs. So we take this to mean that from an HfS language perspective, the OneOffice model is now recognized as really the place to be. Connecting core processes and operations to the consumer experience is the new imperative to drive growth as well as cut costs. Now, we're finding as well that the early digital birds are already ahead. So the companies that have made smart investments, they're moving ahead rapidly. Well, they're already winning, they're already benefiting. And we found a revenue growth chasm between digital leaders and laggards of 34%. This means if you're leading with digital, your growth rate is 34% higher than everyone else that's behind you overall in your industry, in your sector, in your region. This becomes simply an insurmountable challenge to the laggards over time. This is really emphasizing the notion of being able to move quickly while managing risk is the new imperative. Again, it's no longer theory. This is real revenue that's showing up right now today, and it's only going to continue. So what do we do about it? Well, one of the things we'll explore throughout the rest of the time here is the recommendation and one of the lessons learned is to find your process or experience pain points. Use that organizational universal pain assessment tool, if you will, and find areas, whether it's a consumer experience or an associate experience inside the company, where it's just not working. There may be a lot of data, but it's highly routinized, there's errors, it's painful for consumers. That's a pain point. To begin to apply very specific technology solutions to change that process or experience to drive growth. A second big lesson that we've learned, not only from this study, but from our work within Cognizant, is to start small, be focused. We have many conversations still today where decision makers are thinking they can build what we call a God bot. So we can build one machine and it makes everything perfect. It's one big platform and everything will be fine. And that's actually a risky bet. One of the things that we're observing is where digital makes the most sense in an applied way is being very specifically targeted to a process or experience. That's where early winners in the digital economy are getting that revenue growth and making the most out of their cost savings. A second big lesson that we learn is to beware lurking narcissism. So what does this mean? Well, it turns out that we all think we're doing pretty well. and it actually is a mathematical impossibility. 80% of our respondents think they're better than everybody else right now, and we all know that that's impossible, and it's actually points to kind of a delusion. It gets even better or worse, depending on your perspective, is 60% of the lowest performers overall think they're well ahead of their competitors. So if you think you're doing really well, you've really got to take a hard look at what are you doing from a digital perspective. Are you using technologies to grow? Are you using digital technologies to improve core operating processes? In many cases, yeah, right. A lot of people think they're doing really well, but the reality is it might be a mirage. So that's why we say beware of that lurking narcissism. Be very honest with yourselves. Take a cold, hard economic look at what are your customers telling you and what are your associates telling you, because the basic laws of corporate physics are still in effect. This is a great quote from Peter Drucker. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. It always has. It will in the digital economy. There is no doubt, and our research findings support that. In fact, companies that are wrestling with culture are actually, some of the highest performers. 51% of the high performers actually say, look, culture is still holding us back. Even though we're ahead, we could be doing more. We could be doing a lot more. And it's paying off for them. In fact, the companies that are worried about culture actually are growing faster than companies that are thinking everything is fine. So focusing on culture, being very honest with yourself, looking for process and experience pain points, and applying technologies very specifically and in a targeted way versus looking for a godbot. That's part of the winning algorithm for the digital economy, so that you can become a paranoid optimist. So we're borrowing here from, of course, from Andy Grove, who said only the paranoid survive. Now, complacency will bring pink slips. Optimism, we all know, fuels change. Our job, and if you're listening to this call, your job means we all have to become paranoid optimists. We have to be honest with ourselves, but recognize that there's a huge amount of optimism, there's a huge amount of business growth and change that we can all be a part of by becoming that paranoid optimist. And recognizing, in fact, that your back office just became your customer experience. Surprise, and many of us aren't really ready for that, but this is a growth opportunity. It may be painful, and your back office may look like a little bit like this backstage with wires all wrapped together and plugged in who knows where, but this is the huge opportunity of digital growth, and it's the huge opportunity of OneOffice. 74% of our respondents said it's business critical to start breaking down these silos from front office to middle office. It really is all around a consumer experience and employee experience. And also, we found, this is from another study that Cognizant ran not too long ago, that the cost savings potential is still there. We found only 1.3% average cost decrease per year due to digital, and actually we think that's an opportunity for growth, because when you look at that number, it's not so great, right? It's just almost no cost savings are being created by digital. And from a process operations perspective, like Phil said, being able to apply these technologies to those operations is absolutely an opportunity to develop more savings and drive growth by changing the consumer experience. So the recommendation is to pan your business processes for gold. Every back office process, every consumer experience, there's gold in those processes that can drive savings as well as revenue growth. Software, Mark Andreessen famously said, software is eating the world. Well, it should be eating your back and your front office, process by process, experience by experience, and then you can use those savings that aren't being captured yet to fuel digital innovation. That really is the winning algorithm, and that's how digital leaders are already beginning to take an outsized advantage from a revenue growth perspective. So this leaves us with a big question. Okay, so the economic data is becoming more and more clear. It's absolutely true that there's a savings potential that can be improved. Consumer experiences can be improved to drive growth. So this is the foundation for building your OneOffice, for connecting consumer experience to the middle and back office processes. And now I'll turn it back over to Phil so that he can give his point of view on how can we do that tactically, what are some of the steps that we can take, and then we'll get some words of wisdom from the field from Sandeep on what is Mars doing to help them embrace the digital opportunity. So over to you, Phil.
Thank you, Paul. I think I've known you for about 15 years, and I finally figured out that you are a paranoid optimist. It's official. So thank you for sharing that with me.
It's true.
Excellent. And so for folks on the line, you can tap into your little text boxes on the GoToWebinar dashboard and type in questions, and we'll all try and get to them in the course of today's session. So let's get on to the Digital OneOffice. What is it, and how do we actually get there? So let's start off by talking a little bit about the Digital OneOffice framework, and it's really where teams function autonomously across the front, middle, and back office functions to promote broader processes with real-time data flows that support rapid decision making. It's where the front, middle, and back office really cease to exist, and they'll actually become simply one office. And the true definition of digital isn't just about being able to respond to customer needs as and when they happen, but as companies get more intelligent, you can start to anticipate these needs actually before they happen. You can start to leverage external market inputs and data. You can even look at fluctuations in weather conditions or supply chain issues or political ramifications, things you may not have thought about that you can start to leverage to get ahead of your market and really be competitive as a business. So digital operations must have an operating framework that maps out how they have to operate in the future. When you look at many traditional operating models today, while they create some incremental productivity value if they're managed well, they often struggle to drive the unification of digital business models with emerging technologies across the whole business. So a true digital business cannot succeed without unifying the front, middle, and back offices. The Digital OneOffice is the organizational end state to really survive and succeed over the long term. And we talk about how we design this in many respects. And while you look at the front end of the organization and the ability to create that interface for customers, like that front office piece, you really need to then look at that underbelly that helps your company automate, digitize, cloudify, and secure your information. So every siloed data set you have does restrict the analytics insight that makes process owners strategic contributors to their business. You really can't create value or transform a business operation without converged real-time data. So digitally driven organizations have to create what we call this digital underbelly to support the front office by automating manual processes, digitizing manual documents to create these converged data sets, and embrace the cloud in a way that enables genuine scalability and security for an organization which wants to be digital. So companies simply cannot be effective with a digital strategy without automating their processes intelligently. Forget all this hype about jobs going away and all the stuff we've heard that's got us to this point. The whole functions here is about making processes run digitally so smart companies can grow digital businesses and create new opportunities for themselves. And this is almost like a central nervous system that incepts and processes all the elements necessary to make the company function. And then you need to understand this kind of intelligent support function that really drives the company from the back end. It's how IT, finance, HR, supply chain can really align with that, supporting that customer experience as opposed to operating in a vacuum. It's where broader roles are created, where human performance is aligned with the achievement of common business outcomes, which are often wrapped around the needs of the customer. So the focus shifts towards creating work cultures where individuals are encouraged to spend more time interpreting data, understanding the needs of the front end of the business, and really ensuring that support functions keep pace with the front office and stay ahead and help anticipate things down the road. And it's especially the case in industries more dependent than ever on real-time data, using multiple channels to reach their customers, and really being able to think out of the box and get ahead of disruptive business models. And then finally, you need to be able to have predictive digital insights. It's not just about collecting and archiving historical data to discover what went wrong, but it's about predicting when things will go wrong and devising smart strategies to get ahead of them. It's about embedding smart cognitive applications into process change and workflows. It's about learning from mistakes and new experiences along the way. It's almost like your organizational neural system, where cognitive technologies, advanced analytics, and automation can really help create the capability to operate in digital environments by automating and extracting the data needed real time to respond to markets, get ahead of markets, and support critical decisions to stay ahead of the game. So in short, your digital OneOffice needs to be collaborative, it needs to be dynamic, unified, intelligent, responsive, it needs to be simple. A customer experience is just not a fancy interface. It's the core of all your business operations from front to back. Cost reduction, as we've said, is not a strategy. It's about driving metrics that measure value creation, not only cost reduction. We advise everybody just stop kicking that intelligent technology can down the road. It's all here and now. It's about making decisions on where you go with it. One of the things we'll get more into, particularly with Sandeep and Saurabh, is about people who are unprepared to change. It's about investing in an inclusive talent strategy based on people who want to learn and share. In many cases, you have to weed out people unprepared to do that, unprepared to change. It's about building co-innovation relationships and shedding legacy relationships. So the partners that got you here may not be the ones to take you where you want to go. And Paul will hate me for saying this, but it's not about the future of work. The future's here. It's already here. A lot of this technology is already available and only 10, 20% of the functionality is being used. So it's time to act now with many of this stuff. So I'll take you through some of the survey findings, and really, we've got 6 rules for the OneOffice I wanted to share with you. So I'll start with, in terms of talent, it's really about focusing on the right brain rather than the left brain. And this was a study we ran earlier this year where we spoke with 460 operations leaders in the Global 2000. And we asked them, what types of talent are you looking to hire today to drive your business forward? And you can see quite clearly that companies are looking at for their critical skills at creative thinkers. So people who can partner more effectively, they can learn how to work with fintechs and digital firms and analytics firms and specialists. It's not just about managing one big service provider like we used to. It's about finding people who can define business outcomes, be creative, be innovative. They can drive change and they can share information. They can be far more cohesive as a conduit of information and energy. And actually, clients are looking less for left brain people, so people who might be process experts and very very focused on the back end of the business. So the right brain is where many people are looking to hire. So how does this impact the business functions, both in the C-suite as well as the IT C-suite? So we spoke with 100 C-suite executives, and essentially we said, what is stopping you from reaching this OneOffice promised land? On the business side of things, they're talking a lot about mindset, right? So they don't get enough digital mindset from IT, they don't get enough from the business function. Conversely, on the IT side, while they agree there's a mindset problem, there's a big problem here with lack of talent. And this is something I'd love to flesh out a bit more today. Is it's one thing changing a mindset, getting everybody to think differently, work more autonomously, have flatter structure, have more inclusion. But this lack of IT talent is really a key issue with how to deploy this technology effectively. When you have C-suite executives coming back from Davos and all they're talking about is their digital strategy, as we know, it's so much more than an interface. It's how do you pull that customer, partner, supplier relationship much closer together in a much more intelligent way. So this lack of talent to really plumb in the IT skills is where we need to go with a lot of this. And I think as I take you to the second rule here, this is something that may give some cheer to service providers and consultants who are listening in, is the partners who got us here might not be the ones to take us to the next phase. So when we did the study with Cognizant, we spoke with 395 of these decision makers around digital transformation, and we actually divided up the respondents between high performers in terms of revenue and profitability and low performers in terms of the same impacts. And what we see here is that 57% of the highest quartile of performers view their current service provider relationship as someone who proactively innovates and invests with them to find new thresholds of value to really achieve co-defined business outcomes, whereas only a third actually view them kind of in the old model, which was somebody provide skill, scale, and technology. So there's been a real shift in the viewpoints to the types of partners that clients need. And I'm going to be very interested to hear Sandeep talking more about how he's managing his partners within Mars, as an example, because the differences are happening as we speak. You need partners who understand technology, digital, how to actually leverage more out of interfaces, how to understand automation, how to understand your business outcomes, and really work with you more effectively to do that. So I just wanted to share another piece of data just to sort of show how quickly things are shifting in the model. As we can see here in our Global 2000 annual State of Industry study, we've actually seen between 2014 to 2018, the interest in investing in offshore across shared services and outsourcing have gone down dramatically in business support areas as well as IT areas just in the last 4 years. This means that enterprises aren't thinking so much now about this incremental cost advantage. They're now thinking very differently in terms of the types of partners they need moving forward. And I'll leave you with one piece of data which really does blow your mind a little bit, but in this year's State of Outsourcing study we did with KPMG, this is across 380 of the Global 2000, we asked clients how significantly they're investing in RPA as well as investing in outsourcing. And you can take an industry like banking or insurance, which are fairly mature now from an outsourcing perspective, their increases in investment are 50 to 58% in RPA compared to barely 10% for outsourcing. So the way clients are looking at this now is how do we have relationships which are looking at bots and humans and this whole interface digitally in a far different way. I'm going to now turn over to Saurabh, who's going to take us through the next few rules of going to OneOffice.
Thanks, Phil. So Phil talked about how important it is to inject creativity and look externally through your partners to make digital OneOffice real. But I think it's equally important to separate the hype and the exaggerated claims with a sense of reality. It should come as no surprise to us that we live in a world of technology bubbles and market hype. But measuring this hype is proving to be very difficult. So what we started to do was to compare the ratio of market capital versus actual revenues, which is often also called the PSR, or the price to sales ratio, for various market segments. And the results were very intriguing. So if you look at the S&P 500, right, the PSR, or the price to sales ratio, is about 2.3, and it's actually the historic. It's actually at an historic all-time high. Now it exponentially increases when we estimate the same ratio for some of the emerging technologies. So you look at robotic process automation. Our estimate is the PSR there is 25 to 50, nearly 10 to 20 times that of the S&P 500. And then if you look at something like blockchain, it stands at an astounding 500 or more. Now, this little back of the envelope sort of analysis proves without a doubt that there is a lot of hyperbolic statements, a lot of alternative truths, and a lot of exaggerated claims out there. But within all that, there is some gold, and that Paul also alluded to. However, the sad part is that this gold dust is getting lost in all the noise. But in order to be successful, you have to dig through all the hype and find some of the real nuggets that can create real impact. And that brings us to the next rule. So rule number 4, if we move to the next page, is to focus on outcomes and not technologies. Don't try to find a nail for the hammer, but start with defining what you are really trying to solve for. And we have so many established as well as emerging change agents today, but they ultimately have to work together to solve a business problem. And we really believe that the real power lies at the intersection of automation, AI, and smart analytics, or what we call as the AAA trifecta. And while each element of trifecta has a distinct value proposition, there is increasing convergence between all these 3 elements to drive value. For instance, if you look at smart analytics, they are increasingly getting reliant on AI tools such as natural language processing to conduct search-driven analytics. They rely on neural networks to do data exploration. You'll need learning algorithms to build predictive models, and so on and so forth. And I think, in fact, we think the holy grail of service delivery transformation is at this intersection of the AAA trifecta of automation, analytics, and AI. Having said that, most of the discussions that I've had end up being either a capability discussion or a comparative discussion versus an integrative discussion. And the true genius will lie in understanding what to use, when, and how. And just like we realize that throwing bodies at a problem does not really solve the problem, we need to realize that simply hurling software or technology will not really drive transformation, will not really help us achieve the digital OneOffice framework that Phil eloquently described. Which brings to the next rule, rule number 5. It's about designing your digital OneOffice or your business transformation roadmap. And I think increasingly we have to think across 3 horizons. You need to start adopting and industrializing Horizon 1 change agents, such as robotic process automation, or you'll be at the risk of getting left behind. At the same time, you need to start playing and piloting with the Horizon 2 stuff, because before you know that, that'll become Horizon 1. And last but not the least, you need to investigate in the Horizon 3 change agents, because if you don't, then you'll very soon have the what I call the oh crap moment, where you'll say, oh no, I wish I had done something about that in a few years down the line. The last rule, rule number 6, is to not be complacent. As Paul mentioned earlier, the lurking narcissism that we are better than everyone can be dangerous. There's also the deer in the headlight syndrome, where we assume that we are well ahead of the competition, and that's not helpful either. In fact, our study reveals that organizations that have a paranoid culture and a sense of urgency reported to be the strongest performance in terms of both growth and bottom line. So in summary, if you're going to make this digital OneOffice a reality, you need to internalize these 6 rules. Number 1 is to bring creativity, focus on your talent. Number 2, realize that no one can be everything to everyone, and hence you need to take an ecosystem approach. Number 3, beware of the hype and dig for the real gold. Number 4, focus on outcomes, not technologies, and realize that the combined power of and is much greater than or. Build your strategy across the 3 horizons, and please don't be complacent. And with that, let me hand it back to Phil to introduce Sandeep and give us some real practitioner's guide on this seemingly hard journey to Mars.
Thank you very much, Saurabh. So welcome, Sandeep. Maybe you could talk a little bit about the role of Chief Digital Officer at Mars. I think you've been there for nearly a year now. So over this recent experience, what does digital mean for you?
Yeah, thanks, Phil, and thanks for inviting me for this this wonderful call. I've been in Mars now for 10 months, and it has literally been an out-of-the-world experience. Mars, for those of you who don't know, is obviously the 100-year-plus company that manufactures and sells some of your favorite brands. Hopefully, you've all grown up with M&M's, Skittles, Maltesers, Extra, Twix, of course, and many others. But what you may not know is our larger business is the pet care business, which includes brands like Pedigree, Iams, Royal Canin, but also hospital chains like Banfield, VCA, and recently acquired hospital chains in the UK and Europe for pets. We have other businesses in food, drinks, and active flavanols as well. To round off what is a $35 billion plus business and is perhaps present in more than 100 countries, a truly global company in that sense. So the way we have defined digital for ourselves is very simple. There is no such thing as a digital strategy. We just have a growth strategy. We have a vision of where the company needs to be 4 years from now, 5 years from now. And digital is only a way to go faster towards that growth strategy. So in our internal digital communications, our strategy presentations, we don't even call it a digital presentation. We don't even call it a digital transformation. We label our presentations with this title called 100x, which is how can I go 100 times faster? And that's all. That is how we define digital. And that has been our journey so far. It has been all about speed and pace more than anything else. I don't know if that makes sense, Phil, for you.
Absolutely. No, it really does. And you haven't even been here a year, but it feels like more than that. So what are you, now, if you had to put in a nutshell today what you're trying to accomplish, what would you say is the end goal here?
So the end goal, as I said, we are very clear on where we want the company to be 5 years from now, in terms of growth, in terms of financials, profitability, other balanced areas around purpose, what we will mean to society, what we will mean to employees, associates, and so on. With that in mind, we have created certain work streams of what does that mean for each businesses, and what are the most important problems that each business is trying to solve. We have then translated that to what it means to each Martian. Yeah, so in Mars we get to call ourselves Martians, which is really cool. And how will each Martian, current and future, be amplified? Mars is a very human company. It's a very family, it is a family business, and perhaps it's manifested very well in the culture where we hug each other. It's a ridiculously nice company, the most human company on the planet. Coming from the consulting world and having consulted a lot of CPG companies, I feel Mars is perhaps even more human than other companies that I have consulted. So what does then digital mean for all the humans in Mars? What does it mean to the consumers in Mars? How can we apply digital and technology in particular to amplify that humanness? We have come up with a simple digital engine. It perhaps reflects some of the points you guys were making earlier. And by the way, for the audience, I had no view into this survey results before this call, so I just reviewed them, but they made a lot of sense to me. Our digital engine has 3 simple steps. One is find every problem with design thinking, with user centricity, having the user at the center of the conversation, having the human in the center of the conversation. The second step is solving the problem then with data, analytics, AI. And the third step is then automating the solution to free ourselves up to find the next problem, because we were meant to find the next problem. We were meant to be creative, curious, etc. So what we have created then are 3 simple hubs. One is a user centricity hub that is staffed with, as earlier mentioned, only right-brained people that enjoy and bring out the child in every Martian. So every program, every project, every problem begins with bringing out the child, bringing out the human in every Martian, discovering the problem in unique ways, reframing every problem statement differently. Let me give you an example of that. We were in one of our direct-to-consumer businesses, the problem statement that we started with was something like, how might we create an engaging end-to-end journey for our digital customers? This is a dangerous problem statement, because this is the kind of problem statements where a traditional consulting firm will come in and prepare a 3-year plan, and we will be gnawing at this problem for 3 years and not going anywhere. But we got some consumers into the room and we asked them, how do they feel about shopping? How do they feel about buying in this category, in the snacks category, in the candy category, in the pet care category? What do they find disappointing? How do they feel after they have just consumed our category? The kind of responses we got, and 2 days of design thinking later, the problem statement has been reframed completely to how do we enable customers to complete their shopping journey and purchase in 5 minutes or less. Now this is different. This is much more actionable. This is immediately actionable, because 3-year plans make a lot of sense if the first 12 weeks are very clear to us, because in the first 12 weeks, the next 12 weeks will be clear to us. This idea of breaking down strategy into immediately actionable, framed problem statements with the consumer in the center is the whole point of this user centricity hub. The second hub is the analytics hub. We have hired both internally and externally a bunch of data scientists who, when they receive problems from the user centricity hub, are very dangerous, because the problem statement is specific. We now know the question that we have to ask, and therefore, once we know the question to ask, the data scientists with the best technology architecture in the world, the open source data lakes, and all those wonderful things that we have at our disposal, quickly, within days, if not weeks, solve the problem. And finally, we have an automation hub with the latest tools. Actually, Phil helped me with this automation hub, getting the right partners on board to drive automation at scale for the problems we have solved. We are early in our journey. By no means are we, digital early birds or digital champions. This has just been a 10-month journey for us, but I feel very confident that we have started out on the right track, and we will get to 100x soon, is our sense. So this is how we are tackling our digital journey.
Thank you, Sandeep. And you shared with me just I think last week in London some of the methods that you were deploying with your partner relationships, which were very innovative and interesting. You were talking about some of the analytics firms and digital firms that you were partnering with, and not just these traditional relationships. I don't know, you don't have to obviously share names and brands and things today, but if you could just share some of the new ideas in how to drive your support moving forward, the types of talent you were needing from third parties, that would be really, I think, interesting for everybody on the line to hear about.
Yeah, so this role, Chief Digital Officer, is obviously a funny sort of role. We have 4 CIOs from the what is called the traditional IT organization reporting up to me, but also a digital organization. This user centricity hub, the analytics hub, the automation hub, some of our e-commerce work rolling in. And the partner ecosystem we had earlier was very good, was very meaningful, but perhaps very monochromatic, if I may use that word. Now what we are evolving to is a simple 3-tier partner relationships. Tier 1 are traditional large players, perhaps 2 or 3 of them that keep each other competitive. Having been on the other side, I know the only way to be better is to be competitive. Competition brings out the best in these partners. And so we will have 2 or 3 mainstream tier 1 partners for perhaps the larger pieces of work that we do. Even they have to begin every project with design thinking, and every program is 12 weeks or less, regardless of whether it is a large ERP program or a systems integration program or an infrastructure program. It doesn't matter. There is no project that will be more than 12 weeks. Then comes tier 2. Tier 2, we brought on some agile analytics firms, some agile design thinking agencies, some creative agencies. These companies helped us scale up our 3 hubs: the user centricity hub with some creative agencies and design agencies, the analytics hub with some very agile analytics partners. The tier 1 companies are fantastic in analytics as well, but somehow the agility, the hunger, the can-do attitude that a couple of data scientists just show up, find the problem, solve it within days is difficult to find and rarer to find with the larger firms in tier 1. So in tier 2, we have those kind of analytics firms, slightly smaller, well, quite small, in the $100 million range, but very fast. Speed is of essence there versus perfection. And then automation companies, obviously some of the top automation players and automation experts. Tier 3 then is a bunch of startups. These startups are usually the ones that we have. We have about 25 startups we work with so far. These come with unique data models, unique algorithms, some in commodity trading, some in consumer experience, some in the way they do advanced analytics in certain domains. They bring to the table, this hunger that only a startup can bring to try and break through certain unique areas that we are trying to get a competitive advantage on. This is the tier 3 piece. So this tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 model so far is working for us. It is obviously evolving, but I feel this is the right model to move forward with both speed as well as with fixing the digital underbelly, as you called it, as we move along.
Excellent, Sandeep. So as you look at this industry then, how have you managed to kind of separate the hype from reality? You're working for a traditional business, which is really leveraging digital channels. and then you can hear all the noise coming from your old colleagues on the supplier community and around the industry. How do you communicate this effectively to your colleagues at Mars, for example? I mean, someone did a great tweet which just said there's no such thing as a digital strategy, only a growth strategy. But how do you communicate this internally to your colleagues to get them on board, get them excited about this, and really convince them that this is the edge they need to take the business forward?
I mean, first of all, I have to make a lot of presentations. So every week there are at least 2 keynotes with some group at Mars that I'm doing somewhere or the other, which is fun. But to my pleasant surprise, it has been a tremendous unlock. There have been multiple champions in Mars, some of them may be on this call, in fact, who have picked this message up and amplified it and perhaps made it their own in meaningful ways, the digital engine message in their own areas. So a number of functions, segments, groups have started their own digital factories, adopting these methods, adopting this vendor ecosystem, adopting this architecture, and adopting this speed, and have been shouting out successes strongly. Yammer, which is our internal social network, has our partnership with Microsoft that has worked exceedingly well here in amplifying the message. And then most importantly, our first level associates, which is our junior most associates, have reacted the fastest across functions. They don't have to be in IT or digital, but across functions, they have reacted the fastest because they were always ready. So usually in any company, the junior most associates are ready with this message before anyone else. They just need inspiration. And then the middle management has to be convinced slowly. That is what has happened. The partner ecosystem has also reacted very well in terms of adopting and in these new agile methods as well. So far so good, but Phil, it is a large company and we have tremendous potential. So I would say the journey has just begun.
Okay, thank you then. I've got a question that's from the audience and I'll stop picking you, I promise, Sandeep, but in Mars, is your digital strategy differing, do you find, between your business lines, i.e. confectionery or pet food, these sorts of things, pet hospitals?
I mean, the nature of the businesses are very different. So for example, our pet care business by definition has a lot more data to play with, because we have a pet nutrition business that is data rich, but we also have the hospitals business, which is a services business where we directly interact with pet owners and pets, where we have more data. Then we have the wisdom health business, which does the genealogy for dogs, cats, etc. And we own the Whistle business, which tracks dog activity using a special RF tracker. So having the entire data ecosystem for what a pet and pet owner goes through during a lifetime of a pet and pet owner is a remarkable asset that only Mars has in what is one of the fastest growing categories in the CPG industry, which is pet food. Most categories in the CPG industry are not exactly high growth categories. The confectionery business has other beautiful things. Some of the most wonderful brands in the world, most powerful brands in the world, Snickers, M&Ms, you can't beat the power of these brands. And the ability to reach millions of more consumers by both intelligent reach, intelligent advertising, and great content. So by definition, the nature of businesses are different. The digital strategies, therefore the data strategies, the new revenue models that come out of it, the possibilities that come out of it are very different. But the methods, which is finding the right problem with the user at the center of it, solving it with data analytics and AI, and then automating the solution, that doesn't change. Those principles do not change across businesses.
Thank you, Sandeep. And I'd like to actually move to Paul Roerick, because we've got a few questions around laggards and what can people do to drive their companies forward more, close these gaps quickly, turn around their processes. Is it partnering with external firms to bring experience? What's the best approach to moving from a laggard to more of a forward thinker? Maybe Paul, if you could share some of your experiences here.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's one we get regularly, and I think honestly Sandeep actually presented a pretty good framework for doing that. Putting humans back at the center of any interaction, whether it's an associate or a consumer, and then applying the new technologies at a very specific process or experience. It really does come down to, and he said it very well, I mean, Mars has built an engine for innovation. Whether they call it that or not, it doesn't matter. They've broken up the problem, or not just the problem, but the opportunity into the technology elements, and all wrapped around human centricity. The willingness to do that is the big difference between leaders and laggards. The leaders, and another question that we get is, oh, okay, where is this happening? You know, is there an industry that's ahead of others? And I don't know about you, Phil, but I haven't seen an industry that's absolutely knocking the cover off the ball. What I have seen is individual companies, and leaders within those companies that are saying, look, we know this is happening. The debate is over. We must act. Here is our framework for ongoing innovation around quote unquote digital. But, you know, and he said it perfectly as well. There's no such thing as a digital strategy, only a growth strategy. That's exactly in line with our findings. The technologies are the means to the end. The end is growth. And that can include cost savings or valuation or revenue growth. But those are the big drivers. And the leaders are really taking that seriously. And the laggards are, you know, stuck, right? And it comes down to institutional will. Being a paranoid optimist means you act. If you're just paralyzed, or you're thinking somebody else is going to do this, or, you know, Amazon's going to come in and take over anyway, why don't I just, you know, sit tight for a while? That's the riskiest strategy you can take. The way to become a leader and not a laggard is to start small, fail fast, just like the lean startup activities, but then couple that with what Sandeep said about putting humans at the center, and then applying those technologies to process by process, experience by experience, and recognize that's our new job. And then the ecosystem of providers, whether it's a large company that can provide global scale, or a startup that has a really cool idea that works in your context around a specific process, that's the way forward.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. And we got several questions around what percentage of firms have a OneOffice model, and do we have to have one? And I think the best answer to that is a lot of companies are moving towards that, because the whole purpose of this model is it's defining success and outcomes, as opposed to just having greater productivity and lower operating cost. And we have to, and I agree with you completely here, Paul, is that technology solutions are enablers to achieve goals. They provide a means, they do not provide the outcome. And that's where so many enterprises are going wrong, because without a OneOffice end state, things like automation runs out of steam. And even when we rewind back to offshore outsourcing, the end state was rarely defined. It was simply to meet the next set of metrics before figuring out the what's next. So were companies really envisaging running their operations in a similar way as before, merely with lower costs and less resources and some standardization of process? But at least with outsourcing, it was relatively predictable. It was defining how much work to move to the service provider, how many staff were needed to keep the operation moving, to meet these desired set of metrics. With digital and automation, for example, which is necessary to achieve digital, new metrics are in play. We don't have this like random sort of crapshoot of stuff that companies are dealing with, and we need to get more standardization here. So we're hearing about man hours per year eliminated, processing time reductions, and things like that. So there has to be better definitions of success and outcomes as we go through this. So it's really a framework as opposed to a very rigid guide on how to move things. Okay, so I have a lot of questions around RPA, unsurprisingly, especially as Sandeep mentioned that. But first I'll go to you, Saurabh, in terms of your views of coexistence of multiple RPA products and BPM tools and digital solutions. How do you view that in this environment, and then where things are going?
Yeah, no, that's a interesting question, and I think there's an explosion of different products with different value propositions out there. But I think ultimately the definition lies in the eyes of the beholder, I'd say. If you look at the market out there, there are people coming in from different angles. There are some people which are talking about core RPA capabilities. Within there are products that are focusing more on front office, like NICE, for example. There are RPA products or automation products that are coming in from the BPM world, such as Pega. There are automation products coming in from talking about the ERP automation like Redwood. We've now started to see the sort of convergence of RPA and AI, especially with some of the new products like Antworks and Perpetuity and others. And I think ultimately the answer has to be that you need to find the problem that you're trying to solve for, and then look at which product or which set of products sort of helps you solve that problem. If you started the other way around, then you're looking for trouble, right? I think the answer has to be, what is the problem that you're trying to solve? Define the problem, and then look for the different tools. And rest assured, there are tools for every problem. But the genius lies in finding out the right tool for the right problem.
Thank you, Saurabh. And Sandeep, you talked a bit about your early phased RPA journey within Mars. Can you share a little bit about the processes you've looked at, and how have you selected them? Have you looked at the criticality or the business outcome? You know, as you looked at your digital strategy and you looked at maybe fixing a lot of this underbelly, maybe share a little bit about, you know, the thought processes and the steps you're taking here.
Yeah, so we created this automation hub because I was convinced, and I know you were as well, Phil, because you helped me with this journey, to choose a couple of tools that made sense and a service provider who could help us implement them. But along with it, we also started an AI lab and a machine learning lab, which you know, some people think we should do sequentially, but based on my previous experience, I was clear that we had to do them in parallel. Then we used our design thinking group to discover processes, first in traditional areas like finance, you know, HR, etc., commercial procurement, and show some quick wins to just sort of demonstrate magic in terms of what was possible. But increasingly, what we found was a number of use cases started propping up based on the early successes from core processes. Today morning, I was reviewing how we capture, for example, nutrition and allergen data from our products, from the images of the products into searchable content as to what are the nutritions and nutrition ingredients, nutrition numbers, allergens in every product. How do you make them searchable? How our sales team, for example, put together fact sheets for our big customers. Today it's a process, you know, nerve-wracking, soul-crushing process of collecting Excel sheets and incorporating them in PowerPoints. All these use cases have started popping up. So in a short period of about 6 months, I think we are up to more than 30, 40 use cases that are being delivered, and perhaps another 100 use cases that are meaningful problems that can be solved. Some will be solved using pure RPA. Some will need some AI, machine learning, some image recognition, some NLP, etc. It doesn't matter what tool set we use. And in some cases, we will use offshoring, outsourcing. I almost feel like offshoring, outsourcing now has become part of the continuum. When you can't automate it, when you can't AI it, ML it, when you can't 100x it, well, then you offshore, outsource it, and perhaps somebody else can, over time, automate it for you. So this is the same part of that leg, that automation leg. Offshoring has become a subset of automation in that sense. So that's how we are looking at it.
Thank you, Sandeep. And maybe I'll ask you one last question, because in the interest of time, which is, as you look out at this Chief Digital Officer role, how do you see it evolving over the next couple of years in forward-thinking companies? Who should it report to, and what are the core activities that you think you need to drive in this type of role?
I mean, I'm also still learning this role, and it's been a great journey for me in terms of just learning what kind of impact this role can have. I personally feel that this role basically lend speed and transformation to the enterprise. The fact that this role understands a bit of business and a bit of technology is a good idea. The fact that the data organization, the analytics organization, one way or the other is influenced strongly by this role is a very good idea, because that is the core underbelly of the organization. And the other part of the customer experience and consumer experience, if this role can influence that, it's a very good idea. These 3-4 things are important for this role. Well, reporting can be to the CEO or CFO, but whoever it is, it has to be somebody that is completely bought into the vision and maps the vision. IT budgets can be cut. Digital budgets need to double. Whatever that means. It means the budgets for the right problems with the right speed are unlimited. And if that can be ensured, that kind of vision, that kind of exposure to the board, to the owners of the company is maintained, then I feel this role can be a very critical role. So in my endeavor has always been for this role to be about speed, lending speed and 100xing every process, every problem, every individual, amplifying every individual we meet and can impact.
Thank you, Sandeep. Thank you very much. And Paul Roerig at Cognizant, you guys have done a lot of hard work in this space, but how do you think the conversation is going to be different if we were to reconvene in about a year's time?
That's a great question to end with. You know, I think we are at the moving from kind of theory to practice. Everything now, the conversation, and your comment about the future of work is exactly right. I mean, what's essential to our belief and our strategy within digital business is that the future, to steal from the quote, the future is already here. It's just unevenly distributed, and the innovations, right? The actual innovation is not necessarily, I invented a new chip or quantum computing came online. All of those are great, but for us, for people making decisions, real world decisions about what do I do about business today and tomorrow and the next quarter and the next year, it comes down to how do we apply these technologies. And that's the really innovative and fun part. So I think in a year, Phil, we're going to have more of these conversations where applied digital and linking experience to processes and operations to maximize the value, the return on investment. I think it's happening, but that will continue to scale. More and more customers will realize that this is an economic imperative and a cultural imperative, right? More and more people just don't want to deal with industrial era technologies. They want to deal with companies that are addressing them and their wants and their needs in a modernized way, and that's only going to accelerate. So I think in a year, you're going to see this model, this concept, this philosophy of technology more broadly distributed across every industry in every region.
Thank you very much, Paul. I think that's a great ending note for a fantastic conversation. So Saurabh, Sandeep and Paul, really enjoyed your time today. We'll make a recording of this available on our website, hfsresearch.com. We'll try and get some of these slides available for your download as well, and obviously the report that we put out. But thank you all so much for your time. I know you're all busy. Thank you everybody else for dialing in. I hope this has been a valuable discussion, and I can't wait for the next one. Have a great rest of the week.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks.
Cheers.